The Haunting of Willow Creek Manor, A Fresh Start. The Thompson family thought they had found their dream home. Willow Creek Manor, a massive estate hidden in the woods, offered both space and seclusion, a perfect place to raise their children. Daniel and Sarah Thompson, along with their two kids, 12-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Ethan, saw potential in the house despite its eerie aura. "It needs a little love," Daniel had said optimistically during the tour, but this place could be amazing. The house had been vacant for decades, and though the real estate agent dismissed it as a result of the outdated style, locals whispered darker reasons. Willow Creek Manor was cursed. Moving-in boxes littered every room as the Thompsons settled into their new home. Lily explored begrudgingly, huffing about the chipped paint and creaky floors. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed enthralled by the house's mysteries, especially when he discovered a narrow door in the pantry. "Mom, what's this?" Ethan called, tugging at the handle. Sarah glanced over and frowned. "That's the cellar. Stay out of there until your dad takes a look." That night, Ethan dreamed of the door, its edges glowing faintly. He woke suddenly to faint whispers echoing through his room. The first night. The family's first night in Willow Creek Manor was far from restful. Sarah was jolted awake by creaking floorboards in the hallway. She nudged Daniel, but he dismissed it. "Old houses make noise," he muttered, turning over. In her room, Lily swore she heard faint giggling, though no one was there when she peeked out the door. Ethan's dreams were more vivid. He saw a pale girl standing at the pantry door, pointing to the cellar. When morning came, Ethan whispered to Lily, "There's a girl in this house." The cellar. Daniel finally ventured into the cellar, armed with a flashlight. The steps creaked beneath his weight, and the air grew colder with each step. The cellar was vast and filled with forgotten relics, broken furniture, rusted tools, and crates of yellowed papers. But what drew Daniel's attention was an old trunk in the corner. Inside, he found a collection of eerie objects: a child's doll with missing eyes, brittle photographs, and a leather-bound journal filled with strange symbols. One entry read, "The whispers won't stop. They say she's still here." Ethan's doll. Ethan found the doll later that day, sitting on the living room floor. "I thought Dad left this in the cellar," Sarah said, picking it up. "It's mine now," Ethan insisted, snatching it back. Later that night, as Sarah prepared to throw the doll away, it vanished. Ethan wasn't in bed, and she found him in the pantry, standing in front of the cellar door, whispering to someone unseen. The locked door. Lily discovered a locked door on the second floor while exploring. When she pressed her ear to it, she heard faint scratching. "There's something in there," she told her parents, but Daniel shrugged it off. "Probably a storage closet." The door refused to leave Lily's mind. The girl in the wall. Ethan's behavior grew increasingly strange. He spent hours alone, whispering to the girl. "She says her name is Rose," Ethan told Sarah one evening. "She wants to come out." Sarah's unease deepened when Ethan began drawing pictures of Rose, always the same pale figure with hollow eyes. The history of Willow Creek. Determined to understand what was happening, Sarah went to the local library and uncovered a chilling story. Over a century ago, Willow Creek Manor had belonged to the Whitaker family. Their youngest daughter, Rose, had disappeared without a trace. Rumors swirled that the family had dabbled in the occult, and the house had gained a reputation for being haunted. The door opens late one night. The locked door on the second floor swung open on its own. Lily, hearing the creak, approached, cautiously. Inside, she found a small bedroom, dusty and forgotten. Toys lay scattered on the floor, and the wallpaper was faded but covered in strange symbols. In the corner sat the doll Ethan had claimed. Rose's intentions. The whispers grew louder, following the family from room to room. Ethan began to change, his once bright demeanor replaced by sullen stares and cryptic remarks. "She's angry," he told Sarah. "She doesn't like you." "Who doesn't like me?" Sarah demanded, but Ethan just smiled, a historian's warning. Sarah reached out to a local historian who confirmed her fears. The Whitaker family had performed rituals to summon something, believing they could control it, but whatever they summoned had taken Rose instead, trapping her spirit. "If Rose is still there," the historian said, "she's not alone." The shadows emerge. The shadows in the house began to take form. At first, they flickered in the corners of rooms, faint and fleeting, but soon they became more defined, dark figures that slithered along the walls, always just out of reach. One evening, Sarah saw one in the hallway outside Ethan's room. She froze as it darted toward the pantry, disappearing into the cellar. "Daniel, we can't ignore this," she said later, her voice trembling. "Something is wrong with this house." Daniel tried to reassure her, but even he couldn't ignore the cold drafts and the whispers that seemed to follow Ethan wherever he went. The markings. The strange symbols Lily had seen in the locked bedroom began appearing elsewhere. One morning, she woke to find them scratched into her headboard. Her screams brought Daniel and Sarah running, but when they arrived, the markings were gone. "You're imagining things," Daniel insisted, but Lily knew what she had seen. The same symbols reappeared on the walls of the living room later that week, glowing faintly before fading away. Ethan's possession. Ethan's behavior grew more disturbing. He spent hours staring at the cellar door, whispering to someone Sarah and Daniel couldn't see. "He's just adjusting to the new house," Daniel said, though his voice lacked conviction. One night, Ethan stood at the foot of Sarah and Daniel's bed, his eyes wide and glassy. "She says it's almost time," he whispered before walking back to his room. Confronting the cellar, unable to ignore the escalating phenomena, Daniel decided to confront the cellar once and for all. Armed with a crowbar and a flashlight, he descended the narrow staircase. The cellar was colder than ever, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of decay. In the far corner, the trunk he had found before now lay open, its contents scattered. As Daniel approached, the shadows began to move, slithering toward him. He backed away, tripping over a crate. From the darkness, he heard a child's voice. "You shouldn't have come." Rose's room. Sarah began piecing together the clues from the historian and the journal Daniel had found. Rose Whitaker hadn't simply disappeared. She had been sacrificed during one of the rituals her family had conducted. Her spirit was bound to the house, trapped by the dark forces her family had summoned. The locked bedroom, Sarah realized, had been Rose's. Determined to help the girl, Sarah ventured into the room, clutching a rosary and a flashlight. The air was heavy, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse as she entered. "Rose," Sarah whispered, "are you here?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then the doll on the floor turned its head. The historian's ritual. The historian provided Sarah with instructions for a ritual to free Rose's spirit. It required candles, salt, and a specific incantation to break the ties binding Rose to the house. "But be warned," the historian said. "The forces that trapped her won't let her go easily." Sarah shared the plan with Daniel, and though he was skeptical, he agreed to help. Preparing for battle. The family prepared for the ritual, gathering the necessary supplies. Lily, though frightened, refused to leave her mother's side. Ethan, however, grew more agitated. "She doesn't want you to do this," he said, his voice deeper than usual. "Ethan, honey, it's going to be okay," Sarah said gently. But Ethan's gaze darkened. "You don't understand. She's not the only one here." The shadows attack. The night of the ritual, the house came alive. The walls groaned and the lights flickered as the family gathered in the cellar. The shadows surged forward, their forms twisting into grotesque shapes. "Stay in the circle," Sarah shouted as she and Daniel lit the candles. Lily clutched Ethan, who had gone limp, his eyes rolling back into his head. The shadows screamed as Sarah began the incantation, their forms lashing against the barrier of salt. Freeing Rose, as Sarah finished the incantation, the shadows recoiled, retreating to the corners of the cellar. A faint glow appeared in the center of the room, and the figure of a young girl materialized. "Rose," Sarah whispered. The girl nodded, her hollow eyes filled with sadness. "Thank you," she said softly before fading into the light. The shadows let out a final deafening scream before vanishing completely. A new beginning. The house grew quiet. The air, once heavy and oppressive, now felt warm and still. As the family packed their belongings to leave Willow Creek Manor for good, Sarah found a drawing on Ethan's bed. It depicted Rose standing in the corner of her room, smiling. Though the house was at peace, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered, watching and waiting. The Thompsons left Willow Creek Manor behind, but they knew they would never forget the horrors they had faced and the girl they had freed. A whisper in the wind. Months after leaving Willow Creek Manor, the Thompson family tried to move on. They rented a small, modern house in the city, free of creaks, shadows, and haunting whispers. But some scars remained. Ethan no longer talked to himself, but he often stared at corners of rooms, as if expecting someone to be there. Lily refused to sleep without a nightlight, and Sarah often woke in the middle of the night, straining to hear sounds that weren't there. Daniel, ever the skeptic, chalked it up to lingering trauma. "It's over," he said one evening as they sat in their quiet new home. "The house is gone. Rose is free. It's time to let it go." But as Sarah tucked Ethan into bed that night, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. On his nightstand sat the doll.